Hi 7.6, it's Mrs. Sheehan here, and I'm going to talk you through our first online lesson together, since we are all at home, and you're doing home learning and we're attempting some home teaching, so I hope it goes well. Feedback would be useful afterwards, as long as it's kind and constructive, because we don't know how these are going to be received, and there might be things that I could do better. So you could give me some even better ifs. This worked well. Okay, so we are going to look at analysing a poem from another culture, which follows the curriculum of what we've been doing. Now, what you need to do to begin with is take your exercise book that I've been assured you all went and collected. If you didn't, could you just grab some paper at home? And you need to log on to your emails and find the email that I will have sent to you by the time this video is online, which will have the poem we're going to analyse. Now, if you can, it would be great to print that poem, because we're going to make notes about it. If not, you'll need to copy the poem, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So you need to find the next double page spread in your book that's clear, and then hopefully you've printed the poem, and I want you to stick that in the middle of that double page spread with plenty of room around it to annotate. If not, you'll need to write the poem, which will be up on the slide in a minute, in the middle of that. So let's talk a little bit about the writer, the author of the poem. So Caged Bird was written by a lady called Maya Angelou. Now, she is an American, or was an American poet, singer and civil rights activist. She published 7 autobiographies, 3 books of essays and several poetry books. Now, her poem Caged Bird was written in the late 1960s. Now, during this time in America, African Americans were fighting for their freedom and what we call their civil rights. This time in history is called the Civil Rights Movement, in which many African Americans were standing up to whites who believed that they were superior to the blacks in America. And they certainly lived more of a superior lifestyle. So if you were an African American in the 1960s and prior to that in America, you wouldn't be able to attend the same school as a white American or shop in the same shops. You wouldn't necessarily be able to ride the same buses, and if you did, you'd be expected to give your seat up for a fellow passenger that was white. So their life was very, very different, and yeah, the African Americans wanted fairness. They wanted their freedom and their rights to have equality. So Maya grew up in this time, and she was obviously living this life in the 1960s, and she did a lot of her poetry based around that. So let's have a look at Caged Bird. So when we're reading through, maybe just keep in the back of your mind that the author, Maya Angelou, will have been influenced by her life in America at the time. And how does this poem reflect that? Maybe what symbolises, or what symbolism can you pick up that represents the life that she has, or maybe the life that she doesn't have, and how she feels about that. So if we read it through as a class, well, I'll read it to you as a student. We'll imagine we're reading it through as a class. So, Caged Bird. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wind soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Okay, so this is your opportunity now to pause the video. I'd like you to stick in the poem on your double page spread, so it's across the middle, so you have lots of room to write around it or annotate the poem. If you've managed to print it out, if you haven't, you do need to copy this poem down, because else it's going to make it very hard for you to do your assessment, which is what this poem is going to be based on. Now, can you just bear in mind that you need to copy the poem word for word and also letter for letter, so take great care. So if you look at this first stanza here, just highlight it, for instance. Can you notice that there's only one capital letter at the start of it? The rest are all lowercase. Now that's relevant to the poem. There's a reason that the poet Maya Angelou has crafted it in this way, so make sure that you're copying it exactly as you see on the screen. Another thing to be mindful of is that at the end here, there's one full stop. There's no other punctuation through this stanza here. Not a comma, not a full stop, no other discourse markers. That also needs to be copied like for like, because that's something you might want to comment on. So if you could now pause the video, copy the poem, or stick it in, and then when you've finished you can restart the video and we'll start looking at some of the structural and language features. Okay. So hopefully you've got that stuck in, excuse me, or you've written the poem and you've copied it like for like and it's perfectly done, with plenty of room around it on your double page spread for notes. So we're going to consider how the poem has been structured now. So we might want to comment on the length of each stanza. Is it regular or irregular? What does that mean? So regular means that each stanza looks the same. It maybe has the same length of lines, the same amount of word every line, maybe the same amount of lines in each stanza. Irregular, however, is the opposite. So the stanzas aren't all the same. There might be some very short lines and very long ones, some much shorter stanzas than there are others. So have a quick look and try to work out which one this might be. Is it a regular structured poem or an irregular structured poem? Now I'm hoping that you've all said irregular. As you can see, the first two stanzas are the same. So there's 7 lines. They all look similar as well, the way that they've been laid out, the amount of words per line. However, further on in the poem, it's not like that. So for instance, this stanza here, stanza 3, there's then 8 lines as opposed to 7. So the writer's added an extra line. And then in this one here, there's 8 lots of double lines. Why is that? And then finally we've got repetition here. So is it showing, is it demonstrating that the bird's kind of feelings are escalating throughout the poem? Why has the writer chosen to do that? That's quite relevant, so just keep that in the back of your mind. So when we talk about making notes about the poem, everyone does it differently. Now I make quite messy notes, so this slide demonstrates this here. So I have given you a section of a poem that I've annotated. It's this poem, The Caged Bird. As you can see, I've used highlighters to highlight any linguistic features that I think are really worth talking about. I've used arrows to depict things as well. I've maybe circled words if I see that there's more than one of them, and I think that's been used for a purpose. I've underlined certain techniques. Okay, so everybody's different and everybody does things either neater or messy, but the idea is as long as you get it down, it doesn't matter too much. The other reason I wanted to include this is because when we talk through the annotation of the poem, it's going to be on the screen like this, and I actually think that that is a bit harder to understand how that would then relate to the image on your page when you are annotating yourself. So I guess what I mean is, if it's messy, don't worry, as long as it makes sense to you. That's what's most important. So for our notes, can you make sure that you use a different coloured pen to the one that you've written, if you've written the poem out with? And if you've just printed it in, maybe use a different colour as opposed to black, so it stands out from the poem itself. If you have highlighters, they might be useful too. So we're going to talk through some of the structural features in the Caged Bird. So the first stanza here: the free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. Now by now you should have read this poem through at least 3 times, so we've discussed how important that is before. If you haven't, I'd pause this video and just do that now, so you're really familiar with each stanza and things will be starting to pop out at you, different features and techniques that the writers used. So the first one that we've commented on here is something called enjambment. Now I'm hoping some of you will know what that is. So enjambment is when there isn't any punctuation at the end of each line, which means that the lines flow into one another. So if you look down here, there's no punctuation right into the end. Now we need to think, what's the effect of that? So the flowing lines mimic, which means to copy or imitate, the birds flying freely, and gives the reader a sense of freedom. So when you read it, there's nothing stopping you as you read. It makes it sound very relaxed, quite open. It gives it almost like a happy tone. So if I were you, I would probably mark it like this. If you look on, this is the first stanza here of my poem, of this poem. And for enjambment, I put arrows at the end of each line, which shows that it's just moving on and going on and going on and going on, okay? And then I would probably put an arrow off that enjambment and put mimics the bird flying freely, okay, or something along those lines. So the next stanza for structure, we've picked out cage and rage. Now, it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to realise that those words, cage and rage in blue, rhyme. So now, why has the poet used rhyme? For this, we need to think about the words cage and rage. So they're both quite angry words. Here it's talking about the bird that isn't free, so that he's caged. So the rhyme of these two words emphasises his feelings. It emphasises the situation that he's in. So this bird, I'm saying it's a he, it might be a she, feels very much caged, and he is very enraged about it. So the use of rhyme here really makes the poem stand out. Really makes the point of the caged bird, the fact that he's stuck and he can't do anything about it, stand out. So that's the effect for that one. Again, in the next stanza, which is again about the caged bird, we've got some more rhyme: trill, still, and hill. So the caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Now you'll notice again, this poem does have enjambment, so throughout the poem there's enjambment. So when you talk about that, if you choose to do so in your assessment, make sure that you reference that it's throughout the poem that this is happening. Okay. So the rhyme of trill, still, and hill, the poet has used that again to make a point of exactly how this bird feels. So a fearful trill, that's a bird song. So trill is another word for the song of a bird, the noise a bird makes, a trill. Now we associate bird song as being quite a happy thing, but the rhyme is contrasted with the word still, that it's longed for still, and that it's heard on a distant hill. So the rhyming of it makes it stand out about the fact that this bird, it doesn't feel that its voice is being heard. It worries that it's not being heard. Okay, so the effect of the rhyme here for trill, still and hill emphasises that this bird doesn't feel or worries that his voice isn't heard. So not only is he trapped, but no one's going to come and help him or her. Okay, so the next stanza I've highlighted in blue, and here I've put the point that the poet has used longer lines in this stanza. The stanza is focusing on the free bird, while the stanza above focuses on the caged bird. So this one here, the green, focuses on the free bird. The one above that focuses on the caged bird. Now the reason the writer's done that is that the longer lines make the reader directly compare the two stanzas. So this is where we really see the irregular structure of the lines. It's gone from short lines to longer ones. Why might it be? The caged bird has short, snappy lines, whereas a free bird has longer lines. Could it be that the free bird's chances in life are much greater, that they're able to fly openly, they have more opportunities in life, so the lines are longer, whereas the caged bird's life is very small. There isn't much going on. It is very exact, it is very objective, it is what it is. He's in this cage, there's nothing he can do about it. Hence the lines are kept short and snappy. So the longer lines describing the free bird mimic how the bird has a larger environment to explore. So the bird's world is his oyster. We've heard that phrase, the world is your oyster. Well, it is for the bird here. He's free, he can do as he pleases. Whereas the caged bird, his life is not. It's very restricted, and the length of the lines here really reflects that. Okay. So now let's have a look at some language features. Now there's a lot more to comment on here, but I've picked a real mix of more simple language features and some slightly more complex ones. So we'll discuss some of them. Probably won't discuss all of them because it will take ever such a long time. Now if you're using different highlighters or different coloured pens, this would be a good time to change. Maybe use a different colour for structure and a different colour for language. So if you can, change the colour of your pen, still making sure it's different to the colour of the poem's text itself. So, back to the first two stanzas. So the free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. So when we're looking at language, we want to really consider what images do those words, does the language that the writer's chosen create for us? What does it tell us about their feelings? What message does it give us as the reader of the poem? So if we look at the yellow box here, I've highlighted the words in this first stanza that are all verbs and that are chosen for effect. So leaps, floats, dips and dares. So these are all things that the bird is doing. Now these verbs, I think, all suggest a freedom for the bird. They reflect his movement, so he leaps, he floats, he dips. It sounds playful, it sounds fun. He's definitely not restricted, he's got energy. All of these things could be leaping and dipping. That's quite, almost sounds like a child on an obstacle course or something. It's not gentle movements that are restricted in any way. He's able to really be active and move as he pleases, and unrestricted. Even if you dare to do something, you can take a risk. You've got the ability and the confidence to take a risk if you're daring. So he dares to claim the sky. So the reader has chosen these verbs to reflect the bird's possibilities in life and his feelings. He's free. He's able to move around as he pleases. He's energetic. He's able to have a lot of energy. And he lives a very unrestricted life. excuse me, if we look at the purple writing here, so he dips his wings in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. So let's look at the bit about his wings in the sun rays. Follow the arrow up. So the poet is suggesting that the free bird is flying high in the sky and the sun's warm rays are on the bird's wings. So the poet is highlighting the enjoyment of being free. The poet is making the flight appear pleasurable and desirable, so we feel bad for the caged bird later in the poem, even though we're not yet aware of this caged bird. So it emphasises just how lovely this bird's life is. He's playing in the wind, he dips his wings, and in the orange sun rays, it's a pleasant sight. Now, they've chosen the word orange to describe the colour. I think you could pick that up as well as something. So if we think of the colour orange, it's kind of a happy medium between red and yellow. So if it was a blazing red sun, you might think it was too overbearing, it was too much. A yellow sun, possibly that's not warm enough, it's just a okay day. Whereas an orange sun is a really pleasant image of a warm day that's just right. Okay, so you could comment on that additionally. Next one here, so the next bit of purple where it says he dares to claim the sky. Now this is a metaphor, and what is the poet suggesting by this metaphor? Can he actually claim the sky? Can he actually say, this is my sky, I'm in charge of this? Does anybody really have the ownership of the sky? No, they don't. But the effect is that the bird feels that he has ownership of the sky and that he is all-powerful. He feels that he can do anything because he is that free. So it really emphasises just how wonderful this bird's life is and how he really does have full freedom. He's completely unrestricted. Okay. So the effect is that the bird feels he really does have ownership of the sky and full power. Now the next stanza, in blue I've highlighted some really nice adjectives that are used to describe the caged bird. So we've got narrow, which describes the cage, and that the bird's wings are clipped here and his feet are tied. Now these adjectives, I'll just put a little line across to these, symbolise or infer, they have connotations of being restricted, of being powerless, and that maybe there's not a lot of hope. So if you live in a narrow world or you're narrow-minded, it means that you're not open to ideas, you don't see the wider world, you just see what's in front of you. Now the bird's cage is probably quite narrow itself, but also because of that, because of the cage, he doesn't have the capability to be free and explore and see the world. So that's the word narrow. Clipped and tied. If you've had your wings clipped, that's when birds have a portion of their flight feathers taken away, so they can't fly off. So he's had that done, which is obviously, to a bird, being able to fly is one of their greatest characteristics, really. And if his feet are tied, so he's probably got a tie around his foot, and then he's tethered to a bar that he's standing on, again means that he really doesn't have any freedom at all. We could infer from that he feels completely unhopeful or hopeless. Now in orange, I've highlighted bars of rage. Now this is some personification. We want to think, what is the poet suggesting by this and what's the effect? So, bars of rage. So she's inferring, talking about the bars of the cage. Can the cage bars have rage? Can they feel emotion? No. So personification, it's giving the item of the cage, the bars on the cage, a human emotion, which is being enraged, being angry. Maybe the poet is demonstrating how the bird can only take his rage out on these bars. You could imagine, I get the image that he's pecking away at the bars and pulling on them. I don't know if you've ever seen a bird in a cage. They're trying to rattle the cage. So he only has the bars to take his rage out on. So the effect is that it creates the image of an angry bird, that he doesn't have a healthy relationship with the bars of which keep him imprisoned. Next up, I've highlighted in green a really nice metaphor. So his wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Now, as we said, if a bird's wings are actually clipped, he can't fly. And if he's genuinely tied, he's tethered to the cage. Now, if he's in a cage, does he need to have his wings clipped and his feet tied? No, he's in a cage, he can't escape, he doesn't have the key. So it's a metaphor. The bird's wings aren't really clipped and his feet aren't actually tied. But the poet is trying to suggest that the bird is trapped. He can't go anywhere. Now, the poet creates sympathy for the bird, as it has the physical capabilities to escape, but it is trapped in a cage and he's unable to fly. So the bird can't live a free life, he can't fly around because he's in the cage. Okay. So the next two stanzas, let's look at some more language here. If you need to pause this video as I go through, please do so. I'm hoping that you've done that already, because we're now 26 minutes in and I'm just telling you to do it. If you need to pause to write your notes, come up with some ideas of your own, that's fine. So we have got fearful highlighted in like a light blue colour. So the caged bird sings with fearful trill. Now, we said trill is bird song. We associate a bird song as being a positive thing. We might hear bird song at the start of a new day. We might hear it in a happy film or in a television show. It's something that's quite nice to listen to usually. So the fact that it's being described as fearful, why is that? So what word category does fearful belong in? So I want you to have a think about that. Pause if you need to work it out. So fearful is an adjective. And the reason that it's important is that we usually think that bird song or trill is a happy sound. So by describing or using the adjective fearful makes us think, well, this bird must really be suffering for it to be singing, and you know it's in pain. So it then goes on to, the caged bird sings with fearful trill of the things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. So if this bird is trapped and he feels like maybe he won't be heard, or that he has no hope, why is the author of the poem Maya Angelou telling us that his tune is heard? Or maybe it's because the bird is hopeful that someone somewhere will hear his call for help. Ultimately, the only control he has is over his song. He can't move. So by continuing to sing suggests that he will continue to have hope that one day he could be rescued, or that his life might change. Now, the free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees. Now again, we've got some personification here in the orange. Sighing trees. Trees don't have a voice, at least I've never met one that does. So they can't sigh, but it's being described, the trees here are being described as sighing. So I want you to have a think, what is the poet suggesting by this, and what's the effect? So if you need to pause, do so. I would suggest that the word sighing, the adjective sighing, or the verb sighing, sorry, makes you think of quite a gentle exhale of air. So he's not huffing, they're not huffing trees, they're not gasping trees, which would sound much more angry or much more restricting, a much more violent way of moving. You're sighing. Yeah, it's a relaxing noise. So it's a pleasant environment that this free bird's in. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through sighing trees. So sighing trees, the use of this personification makes us see the birds in a relaxing environment, and the poet is suggesting that he doesn't have a care in the world, maybe. Okay, now this line here I think is really lovely, but I want you to try and pick out the information for me. So, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. So which word in this quote demonstrates this fact? So this, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn, this is suggesting that life is easy for the free bird. Food is plentiful and he doesn't have to work to find it. The weather is pleasant. Which individual words in this quote demonstrate this point? So which words tell us that life is easy for the free bird, food is plentiful, and he doesn't have to work to find it, and that the weather is pleasant? So pause this for 5 minutes, have a think, maybe highlight the words and put some notes next to them. So are there any adjectives or verbs in there? What techniques has the writer used that tell us that life is easy for the bird, that food is plentiful? So if you pause it now. Okay, so life is easy for the free bird, food is plentiful. So the food is plentiful tells us that he has lots of food. They're fat worms, they're not skinny little worms, they're not emaciated worms, they're fat juicy worms like the ones you might see on I'm a Celebrity that they have to eat. Really gross, disgustingly, like a widgety grub, fat worms. But that's good for the bird, he can get a lot from that. Now, they're waiting on a dawn bright lawn. So these worms aren't in the ground. The bird hasn't got to come along and do his little dance on the ground, which they do, to get these worms to come up to the surface. These worms are just lying there. Okay, so it's easy for the bird. He doesn't have to work to find them. They're there waiting for him. They're saying, come and get me, I'm ready to be eaten. So these worms are waiting on a dawn bright lawn. The weather is pleasant. Well, dawn bright in the morning when we have lovely weather and it's bright and sunny and pleasant in the summer. That's the image that we've got. And this bird's woken up, he's flying around, and he's off to find all these worms just waiting to be eaten. And he names the sky as his own. So this bird is so happy and so confident and self-assured with his life that he can say, this sky is mine. I own this sky. I have full control over my life and full power to fly wherever I like. I have complete freedom. Okay. So finally, we've got the last 2 stanzas. Now this bit here describes the caged bird. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. Now this is a metaphor for a lack of hope, I feel. So the grave of dreams, what is the poet suggesting? Now, if we dream, we know we do that when we go to sleep. But also if you have hopes and dreams, it's something that you have for the future, ideas that you have or wants for your future aspirations. So to describe these dreams as a grave of dreams is quite a contrast. So we associate with the word grave, death, dirt, mud, loneliness, isolation. So what is this phrase, this metaphor, grave of dreams, what effect does it have on us? What does it make us think of? To me, the poet's suggesting that he no longer has very much hope. Maybe he did. The bird had dreams, he had hopes for the future, but now they're gone. He's resigned himself to the fact that he's not going to escape this cage. In the orange, we've got some more personification. Shadow shouts. We know that shadows can't shout. They're just almost an outline that follows us around, but it's shouting. So if a shadow is always behind us, something can cast a shadow. If you cast a shadow over something, you're putting negative energy on it. So this bird feels that he's not really there. To many people, he isn't seen. He's not real. He's just a shadow. He's just a nothing. On a nightmare scream. So nightmare scream in the red This is another metaphor. I think this is quite poignant. So it's a metaphor for the bird's life is awful. So it feels like it's crying for help, but it's pointless and he can't escape, like in a nightmare when you can't wake up. So this bird feels that he's not seen, that he's invisible, his shadow shouts, and that he's stuck there, he can't escape. It's a nightmare scream. He's screaming, but he isn't heard, like when you're in a nightmare and you can't get out of it. So what I'd like you to do now, well, this video will stop in a minute, and I want you to go through and find any other techniques, language techniques that you think you could comment on. If there's any other words that you think jump out and give you some interesting imagery, or you feel that the poet's used to really create a certain feeling, do so. Make sure that you make notes on them. But if not, I want you to go through and just make sure that you have as much of the notes that I've gone through with you as possible, pausing when you need it, because your next PowerPoint will be instructions for your assessment, which will be on this poem. So that's the end of that, and I will speak to you soon.